Hi, Jordan. My question is, what is the antidote towards toxic masculinity?
Well, the antidote is responsible masculinity. And what does responsible mean? It means, well, if you're responsible, then you're trying to do what's honest first. So you're careful with your speech and your actions. You're careful with your speech in that you don't say things that you know to be false. And you're careful in your actions so that you don't have to lie about what you do. That's a good start. And then the next thing would be that you're capable of taking responsibility for yourself at least, so that once you're an adult, no one else has to bend over backwards to ensure that you don't unduly suffer in the world. And so that's responsibility for yourself. And then if you get halfway good at that, well then, you might think about taking on the responsibility of a family and contributing to your community and doing all those things in a harmonious manner. And that's obviously the antidote to toxic masculinity, which is not a phrase I would generally use. I just think about it as, what would you call it? I think sinful behavior is a much more accurate representation personally, but it's honesty and responsibility. And I do think about it as a function of harmony. I got that a lot from reading Jean Piaget, whose work was a psychological extension of Kant's categorical imperative. Because Kant believed that you should act in a manner such that if the way you acted became a universal, that would be beneficial. But Piaget formalized that very nicely, showing that one of the bases for the emergence of a system of genuine ethics was an iterable form of reciprocity. So that, so for example, I can give you a quick example of that. My granddaughter, who's now 15 months old, has discovered a new game, and it's a Piagetian game, and her game is you sit with her at the table, and her game is she gives you the spoon, and then you take it, and then you give it back, and then she's all happy about that, and then she gives the spoon to the person who's sitting beside her, and then they give it back to her, and she's very happy about that. And so it's an amazing game because she's learned to give up something, to let go of something that she wants, and to trust someone else to return it to her, and that's what she's playing with. And then you can play with that game. It's quite fun. So, and you have to pay careful attention to her and watch how she's manifesting her emotions. And so maybe what you do is you take the spoon and you hide it under your hand. That sort of disconcerts her a bit. Then you show it to her and pick it up and give it to her, and she's happy about that because what she sees is that the principle of reciprocity can maintain itself across a set of transformations, and that's really exciting to her.
I said that didn't cover really a toxic masculinity, right? Because
yes, it's dealing with the principle of reciprocity.
You just said that you have to be honest and responsible as a man, right?
Well, put it this way. When I'm giving the spoon back to my granddaughter, I'm not engaging in toxic masculinity. And that was the point that I was trying to make, is that, and this deep reciprocity and trust is part of the social contract, and it is precisely the antidote to what precisely, since we're going to pursue this, what precisely is toxic masculinity, as opposed to, say, toxic femininity or toxic humanity? What exactly are you asking me about?
Well, I really want to know what you like, how you would describe toxic masculinity. Because
no, I want you to define what toxic masculinity constitutes. Since we're going to define things so carefully, let's do it.
Well, I think...
Okay, guys, sorry, but we really have to move on. So there will be more questions later on. There will be a lot of opportunities to ask
maybe
questions.
if you... Okay, so let's define it shortly.
All right, shortly, please.
Okay, I think that the moment when you kind of... I have a hard time to kind of describe it in English. Let's say, that you kind of... go over a boundary that kind of neglects the freedom of the opposite, gender or whatsoever. So that's toxic masculinity, and that you kind of have.
But that would also be toxic femininity.
Well, may I finish my sentence,
sure.
please? Thank you. And then also, I lost my sentence now. But no, I will be back. I'm back. But more in the sense that. Yeah, can someone help me here in the audience?
Okay, so before we move on, let me point something out. That I was willing to to undertake this line of discussion, allowing for the possibility that the category of toxic masculinity had some content, right? But if we're going to pursue that line of reasoning and quibble about the answer, then we're certainly going to quibble about the definition that's embedded in the question. And so part of what's happened in our discourse is that we're required ethically to assume a priori, merely out of politeness, that the utterance toxic masculinity actually constitutes a meaningful phrase. And if you push it, you find very rapidly that it doesn't, because it's very, very, very difficult to define, and definitions actually matter. And so if it's a matter of transgressing against the boundaries of gender-appropriate behavior, well, first of all, that indicates that there's something universal and normative about gender-appropriate behavior, which is something that people who push the idea of toxic masculinity generally tend not to presume. And second, it's just as likely to happen among women as among men, in which case it's not toxic masculinity. So maybe on to the next question.
Okay.
Jordan Peterson tried to offer an antidote to toxic masculinity, which was exactly what the feminist had asked for.
My question is, what is the antidote towards toxic masculinity?
However, she didn't appreciate his answer when he described the antidote through the principle of reciprocity. Instead, she shifted the question, asking him to define toxic masculinity.
What exactly are you asking me about?
I really want to know what you like, how you would describe toxic masculinity.
In response, Peterson redirected the question back to her, asking her to define it herself, as he believed his initial answer was quite adequate. And, as you may have noticed, the feminist struggled to define the phrase herself, even going so far as to ask the audience for help.
Yeah, can someone help me here in the audience?
Do you think that toxic masculinity is a problem that we need to address in society?
In society, I'd say it definitely is something we should address.
It's definitely an issue that most of us face in some way or another.
I definitely think it is an issue at large.
I've absolutely heard of toxic masculinity, and I do think it's an issue.
How would you define toxic masculinity as a term in your own words?
Toxic masculinity, I would define as
There isn't a sort of logic to it. I feel like it's more just shredding your stuff and being manly beyond there being a point to be.
I don't really know.
The idea that men have to be a certain way, dominant physically imposing and all, and to the extent where
Because the phrase toxic masculinity has been increasingly thrown around, it holds a different meaning depending on whom you talk to. It's also being used to demonize traits that are not only natural, but essential to what makes men distinct from women. Masculinity, like femininity, is a broad and culturally influenced concept that varies across societies and individuals. Labeling certain traits as toxic risks, stigmatizing men for characteristics that may have neutral or even positive aspects in different contexts. Characteristics such as assertiveness, physical strength, competitiveness, and emotional restraint are often portrayed as harmful, despite being vital in many aspects of life, from providing protection to excelling in high-stakes environments. These traits have historically enabled men to protect, provide, and lead in ways that benefit families and societies as a whole. By labeling these characteristics as toxic, the term dismisses their positive contributions and pressures men to conform to unrealistic and often feminized ideals. But by what she just described as toxic masculinity is someone going over a boundary and neglects the freedom of the opposite sex.
Go over a boundary that kind of neglects the freedom of the opposite, well, gender or whatsoever.
Does that sound like toxic masculinity, or did she just describe a kidnapping? In most cases, feminists seem to take issue with the assertiveness and the critical nature of male bosses or men in positions of power. However, if you ever had a female boss, you know that both sexes do have the ability to be tyrannical leaders.
I said to myself, go ahead. Take a chance. Hire the smart fat girl.
Feminists also associate overbearing, abusive, narcissistic, or controlling behavior in men with the concept of toxic masculinity. However, it is important to recognize that women are equally capable of exhibiting these behaviors. And in 2025, there's a lot more men at home that's keeping their mouths shut to maintain peace and harmony. Ever heard the saying, happy wife, happy life?
I never got the point of happy wife, happy life. You hear it growing up and it conditions you to think as long as a woman is happy, all will be well. And then you grow up in a generation where women strive to do exactly that, make sure that they are happy above all else, including above their partner. To live by happy wife, happy life is selfish. To live by happy spouse, happy house is love. And now it confuses me to think why a woman would put her happiness above anybody else. Seems like a big responsibility to take on a wife. It almost sounds like a child. And it doesn't stop there. You have to look her type, act her type, and most of the time she wants a little bit of hood and a little bit of holy. But if you act too holy, you're seen as weak, and if you act too hood, it comes across as you're too aggressive. She wants a man that will spoil her and treat her like a princess, to be called queen but have no class when the words out her mouth are disrespectful as soon as it doesn't go her way, but you must be patient.
At the end of the day, if you are a woman dealing with an abusive, controlling man, then please leave him. That's not toxic masculinity, that's just a toxic person. And if you are a man dating a woman who doesn't appreciate you and belittles you for being a man, a good man, then run, motherfucker, run.
How do women emasculate men?
Withholding appreciation. That's emasculating because it gives energy, right? And if a man has spent energy and we don't appreciate it, now he's disempowered, he's diminished, he's left worse off. And we withhold appreciation from men. We think, why should I appreciate him for doing something he's supposed to do? Because everything you appreciate will keep me done.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, folks, that's all for now, and always remember.
All men and women created by you know the thing.